We're going to create a crystal scene using geometry nodes. I've broken it down into 4 steps that you can see in the chapters below. I'm going to create a circle and I'm going to lower the verts to 5. So I'm going to just click here, select 5, and I'm going to start by filling this and then extruding up. And then I'll extrude again, but this time I'll merge at the center. So this will be the base for our first crystal. We're basically going to use several pretty simple tools. Control R for a loop cut. We'll use the knife tool with K to just do some cuts. And we'll also do, let's say, the bevel tool. So those are the 3 tools. And we're going to just move things around and try and make it look a little organic, a little less hand done. And in general, you could create crystals like this, specifically all in geometry nodes, but I personally like to create the individual crystals manually because I think it gives a better look, and artistically it gives us a lot more control and allows us to change things however we want aesthetically. So this looks pretty decent for the first crystal, and we're going to generate a lot of these, so feel free not to be too precious with each one. You can we're going to randomly generate and cluster these, so later that noise will make it look really good. So I'll create another circle, create it right here. Again, I'll just fill it, extrude it up. Maybe I'll do it again, but this time maybe I won't do a pointed top. I'll just have it kind of be flat. And I'll do the bevel again. And maybe I'll cut some lines here. Use the knife tool. And of course, feel free to look at reference so you can get something that you think looks decent. Maybe this is too much out. I also sometimes like to turn this on, which you can toggle with O. So then I can change a bunch of verts all at the same time and give it kind of an organic feel. I think this one looks pretty good as well. Maybe I'll just do something like that. And I also sometimes double tap G to do like a slide move for a single vert. And my only thought is maybe this is too far out. Okay, I think that's pretty good. And we're gonna actually I'm gonna make this flat also. I just like to have a very clear base to where the bottom of the crystal is. And let's just keep making them. We're gonna just make a few of these. Maybe this time I'll do like a very tall one. Again, I'll merge it at the center. Let's turn off the proportional edit. Do something pretty simple for this one. Maybe we even do like a little extrude here. Kind of take your time with this one, and it can be a meditative process. All right, let's do another. Same as always, fill, extrude, merge a center. You do all sorts of things. Maybe this one will have a wider base, or maybe this one will overall be a little skinnier. I do kind of like it when I do a little bit more manual, like knife tool things with it. I think it just gives it some nice angular geometry that sometimes you don't really get with the bevel. And now that I created that, I can just kind of like pull them in to give it kind of that natural chipped feeling. And you could do it a lot or a little. When we get to the shading, we can always adjust this more and make it look pretty cool. And you can also actually bevel just a single vert by doing Control-Shift-B, which can also give some interesting shapes. I think that's pretty good. And obviously, like the more of these you make, the more dynamic it could look, or the more variations you could get. I'm actually going to try one with 6 now. Maybe I'll do another with kind of a flat top. You could also just do some cuts up here. And let's do another that is also 6. This time let's merge at the center so we have both a flat top that's merged at the center and one that's not. And I mean, you could technically just leave it like this, but I do think it looks a lot better at the end if you've put in some variation yourself. Even have it be not perfectly straight. All right. And let's see, we could kind of go like this forever, but because this is a tutorial, I'm going to try and make it a little quicker. I'll just do one last one. Let's try and get a slightly different shape, so maybe something a little more stubby. Let's fill that, fill that. Okay, let's use this one as the base, and you could, of course, do some more extrusions. All right. So I think that'll be it for now. Again, you could kind of tweak these and make these look as interesting as you would like. Spend some time on it. All right. So yeah, I think they look pretty decent. Okay, so these will be our crystals. Later, we're gonna have to do some shading. So I actually want to do a really quick UV edit. You can just go into UV editing tab here. You could just select all of them, press tab, select all with A, and you could do U, cylinder projection. And with cylinder projection, it does matter which view your camera angle is at. So just trying to go on the side of the objects here, do cylinder projection. It looks something like this. It won't be perfectly in here, but that's fine. We just want kind of like the X and the Y coordinates to play with later. All right, so we have our base here, and I'm gonna just hide this, and we can call this crystals. And we're going to create a new collection. We're gonna call this scene. I'm gonna create a new mesh, go into geometry nodes, new geo node. I'll call this crystal. You can go ahead and delete that plane or that mesh. And I'm going to start it off with a mesh circle. So this will be the base for which we create our crystal cluster. And I'm going to do a distribute points on face and an instance on points. And we're going to do our crystals here, pick instances, separate, reset. Okay, so now we're basically, let me scale this down so you can see it better. We're basically picking random crystals from our crystal collection. And now what we want to do is basically figure out the distance from the center. So the center crystals can be larger and more straight, and the side crystals can be smaller and more angled. So to do that, it's pretty simple. We're going to just do a position node and a vector math, and we'll set this to distance. And now we can do a vector or a map range. Throw this into the value and throw that into the scale. So now I can have basically at 0, I want it to be 1. And then on the edges, we can do something small. And we can kind of always tweak these values and see what really works. But this is a pretty good start. And now we just want to deal with the rotation. Rotation is going to be basically very similar. I'm going to just duplicate this map range node. And I'm going to do a align Euler to vector, throw this into the factor, put this into the rotation. So it's all kind of lopsided because right now we're all only in positive values. So I'm going to do -1 to 1 here. So we kind of have an interesting cluster here. And I'm also going to do a random value, set this to vector. And let's delete this. Maybe I'll do a -pi and pi here just to start. We can see how it looks. And we'll do a vector math. We'll add these two values. And it's pretty interesting. We kind of just like play with these and see when it starts to look really interesting or good. We could also tweak these values if we wanted to change that rotation, tweak the scale. I also like to add back the group input. And I'm going to basically, wherever there's a seed, I'm going to throw this into it. I do think we should also add some randomness to the scale. So I'm going to actually take the random value again. We'll do a random value from 0. Actually, let's do from -0.1 to 1. Actually, sorry, to 0.1. And we can do a math add just to give it a little more variation. We can always play with these more later too. And yeah, we can basically just like keep fiddling with this. And there may be some overlapping geometry, but we can make it look pretty good later. And I forgot this seed. Let's put this into this seed. So we have 3 seeds. And we can basically also just click here and see what it comes up with. And once we have the shading on it, it'll be pretty fun to see. So I think we could tweak this also. And we could obviously also change the size of this circle and the density. And we can always change the mapping and the intensity of this. So I'm actually going to create one more thing. Do a plain math node, a value, and let's throw this in. We're going to do multiply -1. This will be here and this will be here, and now I could do 1 here and kind of tweak the amount that this is rotated. thought 11 looked pretty interesting. Okay. Let's kind of start with this as our crystal formation. We can always generate new ones later. So the last thing I mentioned, or the third thing I mentioned, is to do the shading. So I'm actually going to hide this geometry node scene, open the crystals, and let's go into shading. I'm going to create a shader. Let's call this crystal. And let's turn on cycles, GPU. And now we're going to up the transmission. And I guess we could have this open too. I'm going to just move this here because in the scene I also want to add a light. I think spotlights look pretty cool on crystals specifically, so I'm going to try something like this. Let's just bump it up super high, maybe even higher than that. All right, so now we have a spotlight. I want our background to be black, and I'm going to go into world and create an environment texture just so we have some additional light besides the spotlight. I am going to go into my resources folder and HDRI. Let's try, I don't know, Chinatown. Let's see, maybe we do, let me see what these look like. Maybe we do Fifth Avenue, just so we have a little extra light. And I'm gonna do a light path, duplicate that, mix shader, is camera array. So basically, we'll have a black background, but this crystal will have some of that HDRI lighting still. And we basically want all these to have this shader. So if I select all of them, have this be the active selection, I can unselect that. And do Control L, I can do link materials. So now they all have the same material. And in the object shading now, we can tweak this. So first off, the color will make a big difference for how these crystals look. And there's a really cool texture called magic texture. So if you can see, it creates kind of like this trippy effect. But if we were to put a layer weight here and use the facing vector, it gives us really that amazing crystal iridescence. So I'll put that in here. It's already looking pretty good. And once we add things like the, I don't know, like the floor plane, these reflections and lights will really start to shine. So yeah, the next thing is basically the bump map. I'm gonna do a bump, and for the bump map, I'm gonna just do a bunch of different waves. Not wavelength, but wave texture. And I'm gonna do a color ramp. And I'll set it to constant. So you can see it kind of gives us these really cool patterns. And we're going to want to create a few different ones at different scales. So we'll do like a really big one here. I'll actually go from big to small. So we have this really big one, then we have this smaller one. Let's do an even smaller one where I take less of that and I bump this up. Something like that. I'll duplicate it again. Let's do this one on the Y or the Z. And we can maybe bump this up. And maybe we do one more. This might be overkill, but we can always tweak it later. And let's make it really thin. Maybe something like that. Now we want to mix all these. So I'll do a mix shader. Mix color, which is now just the mix node. We'll mix them like this. And we're going to set this to screen. So this is what we get with that one. We'll do this over here. This over here. And we'll do one more. So there is a few things that I would change here with the bump. I wouldn't actually have all these be perfectly white. We'll get some nice variation if we just kind of tweak these values, and we can choose which ones we want to be more prominent than others. Maybe this one I'll leave closest to white, and we'll also do this one. Let's see. Maybe I'll actually change this a little more. Yeah, I think something like that will end up looking pretty good. So it looks a little complicated, but it's pretty simple. And I can just put this into the height, and that gives us this normal map. I'll throw it into normal. Put it here. And it's starting to look like a crystal. So a few of these I don't love. I think it's this one and this one. Let's try Y instead. Maybe try that. Something like that. It's starting to look interesting. And I also like to add a noise, so it's not just straight lines. And this one we can do something like this. And again, we'll do a mixed node. Throw it into here. Let's do a multiply and throw this into height. Okay, something like this. It's going to start looking interesting. We need to mess with the lighting a lot as well. And then I think the roughness is too high. Maybe something just very small. And we'll let the scene really let it shine. We're starting already to get these crystal-y effects. All right, the last step is to create the environment and the lighting. Okay, so I'm gonna go into layout here, hide crystals again. I'm gonna have this one, let's rename this to crystal batch, reset the position, and the environment's gonna be pretty simple. I'm gonna basically just create a plane, and I'm gonna subdivide this a bunch. Something like that. I'm going to go into sculpt mode, and I'm going to just like put some bumpy areas. Doesn't need to be perfect. Let's move the spotlight, something like that. Maybe angle it. I'm thinking the camera will be over here looking at the crystals. And let's go back into sculpt mode here and just make a little bit of a divot. Something like this. I think as a scene will look pretty good. We can put this down into the ground, and I can make this plane smooth. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Now I'm also going to add a, well, let's first do the shading of this. And let's see where our spotlight is. So we were talking about the camera being over here. The spotlight is obviously too big, so we're going to want to make that smaller. Something like that. And let's make this, let's add a shader on this, and let's just do like some noise and a mixed color. Maybe we'll do like some really dark colors. See if that's coming out at all. I think it is. It's just a little hard to see on the screen with all the noise. Also do a bump so it's not completely flat. And let's bump this up to like 500. We can also do one at 100 maybe. Oh, again, we'll do like a mix. We'll mix, yeah, we could do a mix float. Actually, sorry, I need to do mix colors so that I can use the mix method. Maybe we do a multiply. Cool. We'll throw this into height. All right, so that's starting to look like a decent ground. And maybe we add like a plane that could be like kind of like an interesting looking puddle. And I'll say water. I'll make no roughness, and let's just change the color to something dark, something like that. We're gonna want to tweak this so it doesn't see the HDRI that we have in the background, but we can play with that a little more later. And I don't want the crystal sitting in a puddle, so I'm gonna just tweak this a little. Try and get the puddle to show up in a few places, something like that. Okay. And for this plane, we also want some little crystals on it so it feels integrated into the scene. And I'm going to do that in geometry nodes. I'll do floor. And we're going to do a join geometry because we're going to distribute on this. And let's join there. And we're going to do instance on points. And here we can just do, let's say, an icosahedron. Instance this. They're all massive, so we can't really see anything right now. Okay, so that's, we can start to see it, but it's still too small. We're going to do a set material on just that, and we'll just choose the crystal material again. And in terms of radius, let's actually do a random value. And we can do something like oh, it's not letting us do random here. Okay, so I guess we'll have to do random on the scale here. Let's start it at 0.1, and we can kind of do 0.01 to 1. Or 1's way too big. Okay, so something like that. We'll up the density to like 5,000. That is a bit much, but if we add something like a Musgrave texture and put that into the selection, it starts to look interesting. And we can basically just take this, Control-Shift duplicate it. And now instead of icosphere, we could do a UV sphere. And we could make it super small. We could change the scale of this. Small in terms of segments and rings. And let's put this in too. This is too big. Get these little triangles. Let's turn it into 4D so we can move the W position. Maybe we go back to 5, maybe even bigger. Something like that. And in general, both of these should have random rotation. So let's duplicate this. Vector, we'll do minus pi times 2 and pi times 2. And let's do that here too. And maybe we tweak the scale. It's probably just a little too big. I want to point. Actually, we want this to be 0.01. Let's make this one 0.001. Something like that. And if we go into the render mode, it's starting to look pretty interesting. There's a lot of things that I'd want to do in terms of creating an atmosphere. So like I would create a cube, and then I'll change the viewport visibility to wire. In the shading tab, I'll create new. Let's do density, or sorry, volume. A volume scatter here. Set it to something very small. Let's see, 0.01, maybe 0.03. Then we can get these light rays. And in general, now it's just like a matter of tweaking some colors, tweaking the size of this environment. But I think this really just comes down to like some color grading and some minor little tweaks to make it look complete. So I'm gonna stop the video here and just do a time lapse where you can see me finishing this piece. So there's actually one thing I noticed. This strength for the bump map shouldn't have been so high. I left it at the default one. And if I just bump it up just a little bit, it gives a much better look. I also added depth of field to the camera. I'm gonna just keep tweaking here. Added a hue saturation node here to change the color of my crystal, so I can still get that really cool angular iridescence, but I can also control what color palette I'm interested in. Showing you my compositing setup, it's super simple. I use a color balance. I drop the front a little, up the middle, up the end, and I put very slight colors on it, and I add a glare node onto it. After some tweaks, this is what the end result is looking like. I hope you enjoyed. If you found it helpful, drop a comment, drop a like, a sub. Appreciate you watching. See you in the next one.